We've all heard a lot of voices this week. Some loud, some subtle, some that linger longer than you want them to. Voices tell us what matters, what counts, who we are, and most of them sound convincing. That's the thing. They don't sound obviously wrong, they just sound right enough. But not every voice gives life. Not every voice that calls out to us is trying to give us life. Jesus tells us today that there are voices that speak into our lives, and not all of them give us life. Some take, some wear us down, some leave us with less than what we had before. But there is a voice that calls us by name, and that voice gives life, abundant life. The sheep know my voice, Jesus says. If that's true, why doesn't it feel that way sometimes? Maybe it's because we are not always sure of what we're hearing. There are a lot of voices. They don't announce themselves as thieves. They come in through the window, or they come in through the back door, and sometimes they just shout at us from the outside. They sound reasonable. They sound like wisdom. They sound like someone who knows us, and they have been speaking to us for a long time. And some of them started really early on in our lives. The voice of a parent or a coach or a teacher, not always cruel, sometimes just careless. And those voices told us what we were worth, what we were capable of, what our ceiling was, depending on who we were. And we've heard it enough times that it stopped sounding like their voices and started sounding like our own. And sometimes it isn't even what they said. Sometimes it's what they never said at all. And some of those voices are more recent. The voice that measures us by what we produce, by how much we accomplish, how busy we are, how useful we are to the people that are around us. To the voices that say, rest is laziness. That stillness is falling behind, that our value is located somewhere in our output, that caring for the self is just, selfish. And some of those voices live in our phones, and they don't speak in sentences exactly. They speak in images and comparisons, in the quiet suggestion that everyone else's life is fuller and more interesting and more together than ours. And we didn't choose to hear those voices, but we heard them anyway, and we probably heard them this morning. We're not enough. We need to earn this. We should be farther along by now. This is just who we are. And here's the thing about those voices. We don't usually choose them. We just absorb them. And they get in early, and they get in often, and after a while, they don't feel like something's spoken to us from the outside. And they feel like truth. Like the voice of someone who really knows us. And that's what makes them so hard to shake. And it's not just that the wrong voices are loud, it's that they are familiar. And we have been listening to them for so long, and we know their cadence. And we know somewhere along the way we stopped questioning them and started believing them. And so we follow. Not because we decided to, but because that's what we do with the voice we trust. And somewhere in all of that noise, the voice that calls us by name gets harder and harder to hear. Not because it stopped speaking, but because we have gotten very good at listening to everything else. If the sheep know the shepherd's voice, Why doesn't it feel that way sometimes? Maybe it's not all noise. Maybe it's that even when we heard the shepherd's voice, even when we have encountered it and been changed by it, we still find ourselves drifting and questioning, still find ourselves back in familiar places that we never thought we'd go, and listening to familiar voices and wondering how and when we became lost. That feeling and that place is not hypothetical. And if there is anyone in Scripture who knows this, it's the Apostle Peter. So take a short trip with me. And it's the few days after the resurrection. And Peter goes fishing. Not metaphorically, he just goes back to where he was called from. Back to the boat, back to the net, back to the thing he knew before anything transpired. And a few of the others go with him, and they fish all night, and they catch nothing. And by now, Peter's already seen him. Peter's already encountered the resurrected Jesus, and he was there with him in a locked room twice. And he saw and he witnessed, and the risen Christ stood in front of him and spoke to him, and yet here he is. He's back fishing. Peter, you walked on water at the command of Jesus, and you were there for all of it, and now what? You went fishing? And as the dawn breaks over the horizon, there's someone standing on the shore. And the man asks if they had caught anything, and they say no, of course. So the man tells them to throw the nets on the other side of the boat. And they do. And suddenly the net is so full that they can't haul it in. And still Peter does not recognize the man on the shore. He has seen the risen Jesus, and now he is so close to have a conversation, and he doesn't even know who he's talking to. It's the other disciple who says it first. It's another that recognizes what Peter cannot. It is the Lord. It takes someone else to name what Peter cannot see. But the moment he hears it, Peter just jumps into the water and swims to the shore. So let that sit for just a second. Peter needs someone else to say, "It is the Lord," before he could recognize the voice that's been calling him all along. We don't like this. Well, I don't like this. I want faith to be cleaner than this. I want it to be a straight line. We encounter Jesus, we're changed, and from that point forward, we recognize the shepherd's voice clearly. And we follow that voice without wandering, and we want to see it without confusion. But Peter doesn't give us that. Peter gives us something messier and maybe more honest. Because Peter is not a man who didn't believe. He believed, he had seen, and he had followed for 3 years, and he had confessed, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." This is not a man who had missed a thing. And still, he goes back to fishing. And still, he doesn't recognize the voice on the shore. Knowing the voice doesn't mean we always recognize it. And that's not a failure of faith, that's just the reality of it. Faith is not a single moment of clarity that carries us through everything that follows. It's more like learning a voice over time. And sometimes it's just unmistakable. And other times we're standing right next to it and we miss it entirely. And sometimes we need someone else to point. That's not weakness. That's just how it works. We were not made to hear alone. The community of faith exists in part for exactly this, to say to each other in the moments that where we cannot see clearly, look, there he is. Peter needed that. And so do we. And here's what the text does not say. It does not say that Jesus was disappointed. It does not say that Jesus was packing up to leave because Peter took too long to recognize him. The voice on the shore is still speaking, and the net is still full, and the life is still being given. Before recognition, life. The shepherd does not wait for us to recognize him before he starts giving. But sometimes it happens a little differently. Same risen Jesus, same morning light, same moment of not knowing, and this time it's Mary in the garden. And she's come to the tomb and she's found it empty. She is weeping, and there's a man standing there, and she assumes he's the gardener, and she asks if he's moved the body. She just wants to know where he is. And then he says her name, Mary. That's it. One word, her name, and everything just shifts. She doesn't need someone else to point. She doesn't need a net full of fish or a slow dawning recognition on the shore. She just needs her name spoken by the voice that has always known her, and she knows exactly who is standing there in front of her. So we have both realities living side by side in the same gospel. Peter encounters the risen Jesus, goes back to fishing and doesn't know who he's talking to and needs someone else to say it. And Mary stands in the garden not knowing, hears her name and recognizes him instantly, then runs to tell everyone, I have seen the Lord. Same shepherd, same voice, two completely different experiences of recognition. And the text doesn't tell us that Peter got it wrong and that Mary got it right. It just tells us this is how it is. Sometimes it's slow and someone else needs to see it first. Sometimes recognition is sudden and overwhelming and just drives us to our knees. But in both, the voice was already there. Before Mary heard her name, he was already in the garden. And before Peter recognized the voice on the shore, the net was already full. The shepherd was already present, already speaking, already giving life before either of them knew it was him. It happens this way every time that we baptize an infant. It's a family, it's a child, it's a rite, and it's a ritual, and we can mistake it for something we do because that's just what we do. But there's more here to it than that. A child is brought forward, no understanding of what is happening, no ability to choose, to recognize, to respond. They cannot say yes. They cannot say, I believe. They cannot even say, the Lord is my shepherd. And yet, water is poured, a name is spoken, and the shepherd claims them. Before recognition, the voice is already speaking their name. And that's not sentiment, that is not ritual, that is the shepherd doing what shepherds do, calling by name, claiming for life, giving before anything is given in return. And Peter didn't recognize the voice on the shore, and the net was already full. Mary hadn't heard her name yet, and he was already standing in the garden. And that child at baptism had no idea what was happening, and the shepherd was already there, already speaking, and already given life. And for those of you who are making your affirmation of baptism today, this is not a new voice that you are choosing to follow for the first time. This is a voice that has been speaking your name since the water. You are not starting something. You are trusting something. The one who has already been speaking all along. And this is what we mean by when we say grace. It's all grace. Not that God rewards the ones who get it right, not that the voice, but that the voice speaks first. The voice always speaks first, and it's before understanding and before recognition and before we even know whose voice it is. The shepherd knows our name. He has already spoken it. Can you hear him? We've heard lots of voices. We live in a world with a lot of different voices, and some loud and some subtle, some that promise life and leave you empty, and some that tell you who you are and then get it completely wrong. And we will hear them again tomorrow, this afternoon, maybe even on the drive home. Not every voice gives life. But there is a voice that has already spoken your name, whether you heard it clearly or not, and whether you recognized it or not. And it's not as a metaphor, but in water and in promise and in a word spoken over you that you didn't earn and you didn't choose. Can you hear him? And the voice, that voice. Well, it doesn't wait for you to get it right, and it does not disappear when you don't recognize it. It gives, and it gives life, and it gives mercy, and it gives you back to yourself, even when you don't see clearly, even when you go back to what you know, even when someone else has to say, look, there he is, there is the Lord. Still, the voice is speaking. Still, the voice is holding you. Still, the voice is calling your name. Can you hear him? Because the shepherd said it himself. I have come that you may have life and have it to the full. Can you hear him? Amen.